Freedom of speech is the natural extension of freedom of thought. It reflects back our true, authentic self. In turn, as each individual contemplates their uninhibited self through dialogue, a distinct, untainted image of a society emerges from which it is possible to take account of its virtues, flaws and vices and proceed forward, if you will, on a sound basis. Without freedom of speech, the self-image reflected back is distorted, misleading. In short, a lie. Such a society that lacks the foundations from which a clear picture of itself might otherwise emerge cannot move at all. Dislocated from its true nature, it remains stagnant, a giant cobweb of phony notions and sentiments which address and are believed by no one, and succeeds in nothing other than disguising the unadorned character of its people. Freedom of speech is the only sure guarantee against the formation of cult ideology. Why? Because the pursuit of reason is the natural corollary of free speech in that it is pursued for its own sake and on its own terms, as opposed to those of the cult. A cult cannot allow for the pursuit of reason, since reason's very function is to unravel the tyranny of all ideologies, whether they work in the interests of the state, or a cult, or a symbol of worship. In fact, the degree of loyalty to a cult may be inversely proportioned to the dictates of reason. The more absurd something appears, the more the cult member is compelled to believe it as a demonstration of acquiescence. This, then, is the language of violence, namely, the violence imparted upon one's own conscience in order to gain acceptance of a social group. That is how it can happen that a crowd in the millions can be stated by a cult to be no more than 110,000. The reason is simple. Those outside of the cult have been labelled as a wayward minority. Therefore, and despite all appearances to the contrary, the outsider crowd remains small in number. And again, the law of inverse proportion applies. Maintaining a position diametrically opposed to reason demonstrates the highest degree of cult loyalty. The language of violence typically results in terrible real-world consequences. The reason is that those who surrender free speech as a means to gain group acceptance, plus the rewards that are a consequence of doing so, do not take kindly to outsiders who appear to be succeeding in life without having surrendered that most vital of human freedoms. Enter Charlie Kirk, a devout Christian who set up at college campuses across the United States, inviting anyone to debate with him on a wide range of controversial topics. Frequently, the debates were combative. However, the crux of the matter was that Charlie was winning over minds which he repeatedly argued had been indoctrinated into an education system run by Marxist ideologues. In other words, captured by a cult ideology. It is not so much any particular contrary opinion on a topic that offends the cult. Rather, it is the act of demonstrating an increasingly popular resistance to the opposing of one's conscience, the language of violence, that so threatens the cult member as to become intolerable. The shot fired at Charlie is the arrow which separates free thought from free speech. For it is demonstrably true that one cannot exist without the other. This is Benjamin Martin, and you've been listening to Ragtime.